Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you here, and it's such a gorgeous 1st of May. So next week we will be having a guest speaker. The abbot from the Zen monastery in Rome will be visiting us through the magic of the internet. So, and he'll be talking about the 3rd koan in the Blue Cliff record about Master Ma is not well. So that will be next week. And then following that, I think we'll start talking about a work of Dogen's called the Genjo Koan, which is a work that Carol and I have been studying with a person named Dharmavidya Brazier. And he'll actually be talking on this sometime in June, or in June. So we'll have another guest speaker at that time. But I thought we could introduce the topic a little bit before he gives his talk. But today I thought I would discuss another poem. This is a very short poem. It was written by Ryoka Oshima, who lived in the 18th century. So he was writing these poems around the time that Handel was composing the Messiah. And there's not much biographical information about him. For someone who is interested in such a thing, it's complicated by the fact that there is a very well-known in Japan and perhaps in other countries, young, handsome soccer player named the same, Ryoto Oshima. And he thoroughly dominates the internet with his name. So I don't know much about this person except that he was very well known and respected at the time in the 18th century in Japan. And he was particularly well known for his haikus. So I thought we'd look at just one of his haikus, which I think brings up a lot of things that we can discuss. And let's just go directly to the poem, which is so short that you can virtually memorize it on first reading. The title of the poem is Communion. No one spoke. The host, the guest, the white chrysanthemums. No one spoke. The host, the guest, the white chrysanthemums. So now I have to, okay. I'm having a little bit of trouble. Because the lower half of my computer screen is covered by a wide gray band that I don't understand. So, so I'm having to shrink everything to the top. Anyway, I'll deal with that. But that's the poem, Communion. No one spoke. The host, the guest, the white chrysanthemums. So, you know, a little bit about this. First of all, the title. And I don't know about the translation, but you know, how all of the nuance involved in the title in Japanese, but in English, of course, communion is a word we don't use a lot. It's often associated with the in the Christian world, it's associated with the Eucharist, but that's a meaning that was assigned to it by Saint Augustine. But it was a word prior to that. And it actually comes from the Latin communio, which means a sharing or a fellowship, something that is shared, that which is shared, and has the same root as common, as in Boston Commons, like the shared park. It also has the same root as communicate, sharing information. So communion, so sharing. Now the last line, the white chrysanthemums, and in Japan, the chrysanthemum is a very special flower. They actually use it as a national emblem. The throne of the emperor is called the chrysanthemum throne. It has a chrysanthemum image on the back. So the Japanese are very fond of chrysanthemums. And the different colors of chrysanthemum have different meanings. White, as in the West, white in Japan, as I'm told, is signifies purity, honesty, but it also signifies grief and lamentation. White is associated with death in China and in Japan, whereas in the West we tend to associate black with death. And in fact, white chrysanthemums are displayed at funerals in Japan. And usually they're not offered as gifts on other occasions for that reason. They're sort of reserved for appearance at funerals. So that might tell us a little bit about the setting here. The white chrysanthemums set the stage in a way for the action or inaction of the poem. They indicate, in a way, the form. They're a signal about what's going on, the white chrysanthemums. So the poem starts, no one spoke. That's a translation by Kenneth Rexroth, which I liked better than some of the other translations which meant the same thing, but were not so crisp. 3 syllables, no one spoke. The host, the guest, the White Chrysanthemums. Of course, you wouldn't expect the White Chrysanthemums to speak, at least not in the usual sense. Although they do tell us about what's going on. But you do expect the host and the guest to be speaking with each other. But in this instance, on this occasion, at this time, no one spoke. So if this is a funeral, at a funeral, who is the host? Well, we might think it would be, I don't know, a minister or rabbi, or it might be a family member, somebody designated. In some sense, the host is the deceased, because that's the person who's calling the meeting. So you could even imagine that in this case, the host is the corpse. And the guest is in visitation, is visiting. And there are no words passed. But the title of the poem is Communion. So there is rich communication going on, perhaps, despite the absence of words. And there are occasions when people are together when words just don't seem either sufficient or necessary. When there is that silent communication. And this was such an occasion, described so briefly, but so effectively by the poet. No one spoke, the host, the guest, the White Chrysanthemums. So the metaphor of host and guest is often used in Buddhist literature in describing what goes on in meditation, where one functions as a host, receiving the guests that come, whether they're welcome guests or unwelcome guests, pleasant or unpleasant guests. They come and they go during meditation. There's a sutra from the Mahayana tradition which makes use of this metaphor of host and guest. And I would like to read this portion of the sutra. It's a very long sutra, but this is just a little snippet out of it. Then the world-honored one, the Buddha, stretched forth his arm and opened his shining cotton soft, finely webbed hand, revealing the wheel-shaped lines on his fingers, to instruct Ananda and the others in the great assembly, he said, "After my awakening, I went to the deer park, where, for Ajnatakandinya's sake, and for the other 4 monks, these were the total of 5 monks that he practiced with and gave his first talk to. And also for all you in the 4 assemblies, I said that beings in their multitudes have not become fully awake because they are confused by afflictions that are like visitors and like dust. What in particular at that time caused the 5 of you to awaken and become sages?" So Ajnatakandinja is there, and he stands up and he says respectfully to the Buddha, "Of all the elders here in the Great Assembly, I was the one who was given the name Ajnata, meaning one who understands, because I had come to realize what visitor and dust signify. It was in this way that I was awakened." World-honored one, suppose a visitor stops at an inn for a night or for a meal. Once his stay is ended or the meal is finished, he packs his bags and goes on his way. He's not at leisure to remain. But if he were the innkeeper, he would not leave. By considering this example of the visitor, the one who comes and goes, and the innkeeper, the one who remains, I understood that what the visitor signifies. He represents transience. Again, suppose the morning skies have cleared after a rain, then a beam of pure light from the rising sun may shine through a crack in a door to reveal some motes of dust obscuring the air. The dust moves, but the air is still. Thus, by consideration of this example, the dust, which as it moves obscures the air, and the air, which itself remains still, I understood what the dust may signify. It represents motion. And the Buddha said, "So it is. When the sun has come up early on a clear, fresh morning, a morning after rain, the sun shines through a crack in the door or perhaps a crack in the wall, and it displays the fine bits of dust bobbing up and down in space, moving all around in the sunshine. If the sun doesn't shine in the crack, you can't see the dust, although there is actually a lot of dust everywhere. But while the dust moves, bobbing up and down, space is still. It doesn't move. The ability to see the dust in the light that pours through the crack, representing the attainment of the light of wisdom. When you reach the first stage and overcome the 88 kinds of diluted awareness, you have the light of wisdom. Then you can see your ignorance, which moves like the dust in the sunlight, and which causes as many afflictions as there are sand grains in the river Ganges. You will also see the unmoving stillness of your essential nature." So, communion. No one spoke. The host, the guest, the White Chrysanthemums. I wonder if that brought up any memories, any recollections, any thoughts for you. And I talked a little bit about the interpretation of this poem, but it has many, many facets that beyond what I can recognize. So I would be interested in anything that came up with this poem or with the idea of host and guest. So I think we'll stop there, and we can break up into 3 groups and rejoin in a few minutes